Can we take a moment to discuss French men? I just came back from a trip to France with my family. For those of you who don't know, I'm half French. And going to France always feels like a homecoming for me, but I'm also clearly very Americanized and I've lived in the States now most of my life. So there's also a bit of a maybe not a disconnect when I go to France, but I don't fully feel that I fit in when I go. But one thing that I always appreciate is the charm of a Frenchman. And it's such a stereotype, but it really is true. It is accurate, in my opinion. If you've ever been to France, please let me know if you agree down below in the comments. I do think there is a je ne sais quoi to French men and maybe to French women as well for people who are attracted to women. I don't know, but I always notice it with men. I just find that French men are charming, very sociable, very well mannered, generally speaking. I made a video specifically on the gay travel experience in Paris, so I'll link to that up here if you want to check that out after finishing this video. And last year, I also made a video when I went to the south of France. I made a video about how I downloaded Bumble in the south of France and was like smitten by so many guys, like so beautiful, because the south of France is different from the rest of France in that it's Mediterranean. It's French, but it's the Mediterranean. So you have a lot of gorgeous, ethnically ambiguous people. So anyway, the south of France is its own thing, but this video will sort of be like a part two to that video from last year in that I will use screenshots literally from Bumble that I again had open to see, what the scene was like in this time the north of France, in Normandy to be specific. Normandy is, of course, I guess mostly known for its pivotal location in World War II with D-Day. It's also home to some very charming, beautiful Frenchmen. The biggest thing that I noticed using Bumble and checking out, guys' profiles on the app in France during this trip was how many men are smiling in their profile pictures. And oftentimes I feel like guys just don't smile, don't know how to smile. And maybe it's also a gay thing that I feel like a lot of guys, including me, sometimes try to look very, demure and serious. But I found it so pleasantly charming how many guys led with a smiling photo. It really is endearing, right? To see somebody lead with a smile, whether in real life or, a dating app profile. The other thing I noticed is how many men actually take the time to fill out their bios. Thorough descriptions, here's an example, thorough descriptions of what they're looking for, what they're into. I also found multiple guys specifying whether they're a top or a bottom, but instead of just mentioning it, they would preface like, I know it's superficial or I know that it's like tacky, but it's kind of important. I'm a top or I'm a bottom. And I found it very charming that like self-awareness, whereas most of the time when people specify that in a profile, I feel like it's very like cut to the chase kind of thing. Now there is a downside. There's always a catch, right? And I mentioned this last year in the video that I made on checking out guys' profiles in the south of France. France is such a smoking culture. And I think for those of us who live in the States, it really is interesting how much of a cultural thing it is, because in the US, you don't really have a huge smoking population. Drinking socially is obviously omnipresent. And, now you see all these kids vaping, or I guess they're not kids anymore, but Gen Z loves their vape, but you don't really see people smoking cigarettes that often, except for, I would say, in a city like New York City that is such a metropolis. But when I go to France, I'm always stunned by how ubiquitous smoking is. I've stayed in hotel rooms that were definitely non-smoking hotel rooms. In fact, they often will tell you when you check in, because it's such a smoking culture that they have to clarify for you, hey, just a reminder, you can't smoke. I have stayed in hotel rooms in Paris that smell like cigarettes, even though they are non-smoking rooms. I have eaten at restaurants in France where smoking is not allowed inside the restaurant, but it doesn't even matter because there's so many people smoking like chimneys right outside the restaurant that all the smell from the smoke makes its way into the restaurant. So if you're like me, where you get really turned off by smoking from a health perspective, but also just like, I feel like it's like pollution. Like I can't escape it. When I smell smoke, I feel like it's going to get in my hair, now that I have hair, my clothes. I just get really turned off by it. So that's the one thing, the one caveat that comes with, I feel like, dating a French man. There's probably a 78% chance that he is at least a casual smoker. But beyond that, I have to say, this was one of those trips where I was like, damn, I feel like, listen, sometimes there's more than meets the eye, right? I remember when I used to visit Miami in the winter from New York City, and I used to romanticize the options that I saw on apps like Tinder and Bumble and Grindr and so on. So who knows what it's really like living there. And if you have lived or currently live in France, I would love to hear your opinion on this. But my first impression whenever using apps in France, and it's not my first time using these apps or making a video about it, I just find the men more elevated than what I'm used to in the States. They're more communicative. They're more, again, charming and polite and inquisitive. And it's such an attractive thing. I also find that European men in general are more traditional. And really, that's probably the whole globe outside of, well, I shouldn't say the entire globe, but a lot of places in the world, people are more old school and traditional versus in America, where so much of US culture is about the freedom to do whatever the hell you want to do, right? It's a very freedom oriented, individualism oriented culture, which has many advantages for sure, but it's also a double edged sword, right? Because what happens is then you go to France or you go to another country where you see how people are more old school and you see the value in that as well. And of course, there's a downside to that too. I mean, everything has its pros and cons, but now I'm back in the States and I wanted to share my thoughts with you guys. Please let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll catch you guys next time.